And then you juxtapose that with the idea like years ago, Black women were responsible for raising a lot of white children.
Yep. Yep.
Whether it was on a plantation, whether it was as a nanny, whether, you know what I mean, a housekeeper, maid, whatever. Like there was a even that, and you read the stories, they brought along an ethic of care for other people's children. And then you fast forward that now there's mostly white women in charge of educating Black children. And when you hear some of the comments made about Black children, when you see the research, when you see even their researchers say like, hey, you know what? A Black child experiences their teacher's racial biases as early as 3 and 4 years old. You know, there's something to that, and we ignore it at our own peril. Like, and so how do we raise the bar for just how we all look at people's children, and where can we draw from? You know, where do we center, and how do we introduce ways of thinking and being into educator prep programs? And we often talk about teachers because that's the massive amount, but just if not more importantly is what's the superintendent's license? Like what goes into that?
Yeah.
What goes into the principal certification program? And how do we know that principals are prepared to lead schools in a way that centers not only the students, but also those who are closest to serving and leading those students? Right. Yes. So it's like the really, and then you step back and we often talk about who's leading classrooms, but I'm even more concerned about who's preparing those who are leading classrooms. Our universities, what's their intellectual and cultural genealogy that they bring to bear to train someone, to develop someone, to lead someone, and then say, I'm also responsible for you, because that's also a big part of it. Like, I'm responsible for your learning and your success and those that you touch. That's a very different mindset as opposed to pay the office. Here's your grade. Whatever you do, once you lead a classroom, it has nothing to do with me.
Yes.
That's a very different, again, back to communal. One is a communal way of looking at humanity and our shared sense of purpose. Another one is not. And too often the latter is what our students are experience, and there's a penalty for that.
When you speak about the communal sense of things, I've said this for a long time, and I mean it, right? When we talk about community, is when I make your problem my problem, and
solve it together.
Yes. So when you juxtapose what Black women were doing in charge of other people's children, and now thinking about over 80% of our teaching force being in charge of other people's children and what the outcomes are, it does speak to a larger issue that if we don't solve, counteract, do some things to, harm reduction is one thing, but transformation is really what the goal should be, right? I agree with you. We're going to be in such a problem, right? If I'm thinking big picture, this is me personally talking, right? It is one of my goals, dreams, to help revolutionize, to change teacher prep, educator prep programs. Because I think about how I wasn't prepared to do, the work of educating a child, and I had to learn and then unlearn and then get, better resources in my hand. And then I started realizing, oh, wait a minute, the stuff that I naturally did and learned in my community, like, there was a sense in which if I was running down the street and doing something wrong, the neighbor could get on me, call home. When I got home, my grandparents already heard the story and they got on me too, right? Like, and when I think about that type of care, us kind of moving from, metaphorically speaking, bigger porches and smaller fences to larger fences and smaller porches. When we moved away from that communal sense of things, we lost, I'm going to say, a piece of ourselves in the process. And so my hope is that through the work of folks like yourself, folks who are in the trenches, trying to do this work in schools and the like, that we could kind of reclaim that sense of identity. Because, and I don't know if this is like, you can speak to this for me, and this is an open-ended question. But I'm wondering if when we think about the trajectory of education, are we having an identity crisis that needs to be solved?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot of space to relearn, remember, and relearn,
Yeah. Yeah.
as Dr. Carr often, talks about, like, who are we as a people? What's the, one, just going the route of what's the purpose of education? Like, it really starting there, because there unfortunately there are folks who really look at this as a job. Like, hey, I get a job, and unfortunately, this is so sad, but, like, no matter where I go in this country, I can start a phrase and people can finish it, because I get paid whether you, and people say some iteration of whether you learn or not.
Like that. Yeah.
How many students have actually heard that? So let's start there, right? Like, like, what does that even mean? That means that you're not tying your success to that child's success. That means that, the hell with you. Like, listen, I gave it, you didn't get it. It's up to, this is the individual thing, right? Where a communal sense, a sense of humanity, because it doesn't mean that don't have a sense of urgency. Because I've seen the other side where people have no structure. You're talking about being regimented. The other side of that same coin, sometimes right next door to your classroom,
Right.
would be somebody like, oh, I just love the babies, and I'm just giving hugs and cookies. What about, you teaching them to read? No, they're poor. I don't want to push them. They're like intellectually unable to meet challenges with my support. So I ain't going to support them, and I'm not going to challenge them, and we're just going to, just carry on for the next 180 days, right? Like, there's like super regimented, and then there is this laissez-faire, like, I don't care what happens,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so the idea is, like, how do you bring both to bear, this level of urgency and this sense of community,
Yeah.
a shared sense of purpose, common respect, but, like, hey, you know what? I have high expectations, because that's one of the things that the research also shows, is that pound for pound, the culture of Black teaching traditions is high expectations.
High expectations. Yeah.
It's like, oh
Yeah.
no, you can do this. Oh no, you're capable. No, and remember, it's not just for Black children. They also say that for other people's children. Oh no, we're going to meet the bar,
Yes.
right? Where the racial biases come in and say, like, that kid won't even graduate high school. That kid's certainly not going to college, right? Like, this is over and over and over again. And we're talking about, like, a singular thing, like it's not happening across 180 days every year for 13 years. Like, that's if a child lasts that long in a system that's constantly saying you're worth less and worthless.
As we look over the landscape of what we have coming, and potentially the Department of Education being wiped away and all the things, I think what you're talking about is going to hold a lot more weight, because we can argue budgets and dollars, and we can argue that we need more funding and we need these things. And don't get me wrong, that's a valid argument. But when we can't guarantee where the next dollar is coming from and where it's going to go based on the needs of the district and all the things, we can do more with less if we get our mind and our hearts right for how we approach education. And that deep internal work is something that I hope educators who are listening really glean from what's been shared here. I want to shift a second to give opportunities to talk about rebuilding the pipeline for us for a second, and kind of the importance of that as we round out our time.
Great. And I do want to say, like, this, the budget constraints that can and very likely will happen if the Department of Ed is shut down. People are thinking automatically, or assuming automatically, like, oh, the money that the federal government, which wasn't a lot, but for, like, many schools, particularly for Title I, special ed,
Yep. Yep.
block grants, things like that, it is a significant amount, even though it is mostly state, local,
Funded.
but people are assuming that all of that money is going to go to states, and that's highly unlikely. There will be a skimming of that. So states will receive less funding than what they receive now. And then states will have to figure out, okay, what are we cutting? How many educators are we cutting? How big are classrooms going to get? What services and supports students who need more supports, what won't they receive, right? And then there are some places that say, oh, we'll just raise taxes. There will be many places that won't be able to do that. So that will be a massive issue in our spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. So talk to us as we round out our time, just about the work you're doing in rebuilding the Black Educator Pipeline.
Yeah, this is like one of the things that like really brings me hope and inspiration is working with the youth. I was in the school for 26 years, and so not being a teacher and a principal, I miss it a lot. But what helps sustain me is really investing in this pipeline where we're inviting Black youth to come in and look at it as a profession. So it's really career exploration, workforce
Mm-hmm.
development even, but doing it by introducing here's how teaching and learning historically has taken place in our communities, and given youth opportunities to engage, to learn about Black teaching traditions, to see how it would apply and then practice it. So think about it as early exposure to these teaching traditions, and then clinical experiences to practice it by teaching, just like any other career exploration. Just it was fascinating to me to when I came to the realization that if you want to become a teacher as a high school youth, if you're even just interested in exploring, where do you go? Where do you have, you know what I mean? Like if you want to be an athlete, there's so many programs for you to go and
100%.
practice. If you
Yeah.
want to become a musician, an artist, even in STEM, there are programs after program after program. I'm not saying it's enough, but there are ways to figure out. But it was hard to find something for a youth who says, I think I'm interested in teaching. There was an assumption like, well, you were a student for 13 years. So if you're interested in teaching, just come knock on the door after you graduate college.
Mm.
Some youth were coming to us who would say, like, have you spoken to your teacher about your career aspirations? They said, yeah, I spoke to my teacher. My teacher said, oh, come help me with my bulletin boards or come help me pass out papers. And the kid is like, wait a minute, like it just seems like there's something much deeper, and they didn't
Yeah.
always have the words or the language for describing it, but they were looking for like, how do you make all the decisions that you make? How do you break these complex issues down to something that's manageable? How do you command the attention and respect of a classroom? How do you motivate us, right? Like, so they're like, we're experiencing it, but we're not, maybe they're not experiencing it, but they're just like, hey, I want to learn how to do that. And so realizing that, we decided to let's start a teaching academy at the school I was leading. And we invited high school youth to take it. And we partnered with Arcadia University for them to get dual enrollment credit. So that evolved into our teaching academy, where students receive not only coursework and credit, but then also experiences. And we try to couple it with the dual enrollment opportunities and the clinical experience of then, okay, go practice in a younger grade. And then we had our Freedom School Literacy Academy that we're actually recruiting for now for
Mm-hmm.
coaches, instructional leads, as well as high school and college students, where they teach first, second, and third graders. So again, they're learning about these teaching traditions. But it's in again back to this communal effort. Learning and teaching has always been an intergenerational endeavor.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in schools where we say, nope, you separate. Your first grade, you stay here. You don't engage with anybody else, maybe at recess, but or lunch, but you are there, you stay there. You're here, you stay there.
Yeah.
As soon as the bell rings, they come outside. Most of the time they're like reintegrating,
Yeah.
and we learn from our siblings. They learn from their older cousin. The cousin learned from the older, like naturally.
Yeah.
It's an intergenerational model of passing along information, trying things out, giving feedback. That is how it is. And so that's how we modeled our Freedom School Literacy Academy, which is how freedom schools work anyway,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
We're just saying like, hey, this is going to be a teacher development, career exploration program in addition to the Freedom School. And we talked to researchers around literacy. We said, what could a 10th grader What could they do during the summer that addresses the summer slide that supports a younger sibling? Are there like foundational pieces of literacy that, someone who's not a education or literacy reading major, but could work with a first grader on? And they're like, oh yeah, here are the scientifically proven methods and strategies that they can use. That's what we did. We took that, we married it to the competencies, the ethics of care, high expectations, community building, and we designed a program for youth in high school and college age to explore this is what leading a classroom looks like. And then they're coached by our staff. So again, back to the intergenerational
So,
model. And then we couple those two with our fellowship. And the fellowship, we want students to, it's one thing to try to recruit youth and it be disconnected from the social, political, and economic realities that they face. So, come be a teacher. But, oh, well, what about the debt, the loan debt? Oh, we ain't worried about that. Just come teach. Oh, come be a teacher. Well, I'm first gen. How do I navigate? I ain't got nothing to do with that, but just, come
just come
teach.
teach, right?
We're
Right.
saying, no, we actually want to support. And most high schools and districts don't have a formalized mechanism to support alumni.
No.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna be a teacher. All right, I'll see you in 4 years after you graduate, come back. But, they'll often have informal relationships with former educators. But suppose we built a formalized structure where we're like, hey, we're going to help you navigate and be able to return with little to no debt, as well as academic and social support as you matriculate through college. And so that's an investment of $5,000 a year as they matriculate through college. This is, again, we want them to graduate as debt free as possible. But then once they return to your school, Bobby, and they get to their 5th year of teaching, they get a retention stipend up to $20,000. Again, and it's there. So we do financial literacy, pay your taxes. Then after that, you want to pay any loan debt down, or you want to do a down deposit, you want to invest it, you want to just save it. It's yours, because everything else in America, if it's important, we have some kind of financial incentive to it. If it's
Absolutely.
teaching, it's just like, just love it. It's okay to be in debt, but thank you for your service. We're
Thank
like,
you.
thank you for your service. And here's a little financial, small, but significant simultaneously.
I love that. It reminds me of being with my grandfather. I was raised primarily with my grandparents, and my grandfather took me outside on a Saturday morning. He used to take me out at like ungodly hours, and and he he had me go out into the side of the house where he had this piece of land on our property picked out. And on this piece of land, what we were going to do was plant a garden. And I'm like, man, I'm gonna just throw down this seed and
Right,
I'm gonna
right.
go back in the house and go to sleep. So I throw down the seed and I think I'm about to do that. And my grandfather's like, no, boy, he would call me boy. No, boy, we're not gonna just throw down the seed. If you don't take care of the soil, then nothing will grow. And I never forgot that point, because often we are throwing Black educators, Black teaching, Black professionals into spaces where we just hope that they grow, but we never dealt with the soil to see if it's conducive to sustaining that which we're trying to plant. And so I'm greatly, like, highly appreciative of the work that you're doing to not only just retain, but not only just to get them in, but to retain and sustain and build and all of that, because I think that's so necessary. And I want folks to be able to connect with you, your genius, and what you do. But a quick backstory: a few years ago, I was teaching in Trenton, New Jersey, and I came across an ad for the Black Male Educator Convening, and I was like, "What is this? I've never heard of this." So I'm teaching, I'm teaching math in Trenton, New Jersey, and I said, "Hey, school, can you pay for me to go to this? I want to go." And I went, and it was such a rejuvenating time for me. This was several years ago. And I didn't know who ran it, who was a part of it, anything. I just walked in blind and I
Right.
figured it out. I was going to figure it out. And somebody brought me to this one workshop where there was a panel of people talking about the future of education. And they said, I need you to meet Sharif El-Mekki. And I was like, okay, okay. And I walked up to you, and nobody said anything. They didn't say this is the person who ran it, but you engaged with me. I know you probably don't even remember this. You engaged with me for a significant amount of time in a conference that you were running, asked me about my goals, what I was doing, encouraged me, and I never ever forgot it. So this moment is like full circle for me
Wow.
to
Wow.
be able to connect with you. And I just want to be able to, as our elders would say, give you your flowers while you're still living and say thank you, because your work has impacted me greatly. And it is part of why I'm continuing to do this work as a principal where I serve.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, and that's the community that I experienced as a student as well as a teacher. I didn't realize at the time, but I was very fortunate and blessed to land as a teacher where I was. It was at Turner Middle School, Southwest Philadelphia. Out of staff about 50 or 60, it was only two new teachers, me and
Mm,
Brett Levinson. We were the only two. So at the time, I didn't know that was significant. Later, I would find like, yo, only two new teachers and surrounded by these veterans who it was a community based school, and just like the level and then the instructional expertise that I would see
yeah.
from these teachers was just like, I've literally, even though I wasn't an education major, fell in love with pedagogy, learned, fell in love with with those aha moments and connecting the dots and things like that. And so, and fast forward when during this time, there were, again, intergenerational, there were veteran teachers like Salome Thomas L, who would pull us together,
Yeah.
and then eventually him and Dr. Hildebrand Pelzer, the
Hmm.
third, like they created Association of Black School Administrators,
Yep.
right? And which was supporting new principals. But I entered the profession, Dr. Martin Ryder convening a group of us, black and brown men, and said, consider leading classrooms. Like, we need you. And he had a goal of supporting 500 men of color to teach in the Philadelphia school district. And so BMAC, that Black Male Educator convening, was really learned from people like Salome Thomas L, Hildebrand, Leonard Hurd, and in particularly the man who invited me into the profession, Dr. Martin Ryder,
Mm,
who would have many convenings, and that just informed and shaped and just like, if we're serving our community, let's one look at like how we were served or how we wish we were served. I was fortunate to be able to say this is how I was served, and like, okay, let's continue, the tradition of lifting as we climb that, people like Mary Church Terrell kind of encapsulated and taught us. So I'm grateful, and it's really you and others who participate. You can have a dope dinner party. Everybody there, like dope meaning it's like crowded, it's packed.
yeah. Yeah.
But if the guests ain't vibing, if they the wrong guests,
Come on, sir.
it ain't really dope. It's just like you just having dinner,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you can have other times when you have like, oh, this is the perfect guest. Like they make it, right? Like the guests make the host look good. The host is like, yeah, folks came. I had the venue, but it's like, who was there? What's their mindset? How do they think about education? How do they think about other Black men and the community,
Yeah.
right? Because it's open to everybody.
Yeah.
And then we center the Black male, Black man's experiences, perspectives, and stated needs, right? Like, and we
Mm,
don't often get that, especially in the education space. You might go somewhere, you're the only one, so it's rare that it's like, hey, how have you experienced education, Mr. Morgan? Like, how have you,
right.
right? But to be able to be a part of a space, but again, to invite us into the profession, say, hey, we're trying to get 500, Black and Latino men to teach. They had to think about what were our needs, what were our perspectives, what were our experiences. So, if anything, we have the honor of standing and leaning on shoulders that are just broad and have a vision, right? So that's, I'm glad that not only did you come, but you've come back. To me, that's
Yeah.
like coming once is one thing, but with those who return, that says so much. That's such a level of feedback, and sense of belongingness in the community, because that is y'all, your space and our space. So
Yeah.
anyway, all that, grateful for your, your partnership support and your work ultimately. I was glad to see you, jumping in the podcast. I remember your first, I was like, all right, okay, so like that's been really just dope to, to see. I think we were midway through our 8 Black Hands
Yes.
work when I started seeing. I'm like, all right, brother Morgan is getting it in, like so this is like just kudos.
Yeah.
We need more of our voices, and everywhere. My mom used to say, everywhere's a classroom.
Yeah.
And back in the day, they say each one teach one. Each one reach one, each one teach one. Like nah, like what? Each one can reach and teach tens of thousands at this point with social media.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's do that.
Let's do that. Speaking of which, brother, how can folks get in touch with you, support your work, connect?
Yeah, we're on all the social media platforms at Center Black Ed, Black ED, and the website is www.thecenterblacked.org. Again, on all the social media platforms. We're currently recruiting for this intergenerational model of Freedom School Literacy Academy 2025. We're looking for a high school youth. We're looking for college youth. We're looking for instructional coaches. And we're also looking for families with first, second, and third graders. So we are in person in Philadelphia at 4 or 5 sites. But we've maintained our virtual model since 2020. It's continued to do so well that we've maintained that. So that's our national Freedom School Literacy Academy. It's a paid apprenticeship, so it's not volunteering. High school and college students, as well as the coaches, obviously, they are paid as they explore what are Black teaching traditions and what are foundations of literacy that
Mm-hmm.
we can pour into first, second, and third graders in the summer. So we welcome, please share it and you don't have to know you want to be a teacher. If you want to just explore and learn as well as lift as you climb, it's a great opportunity for our youth.
I'm going to invite the Liberation Lab community to definitely tap into my brother's work for sure. And even after this recording, I want to connect about how we could partner, because I have some folks in mind that I know could mutually benefit from what's going on. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for the consistency, the heart that you put into this thing. And like I said, when I walked in, nobody was like, that's the guy. And you didn't even say that was the guy. You just serve and do what you do. So thank you. Yes, absolutely. So appreciate you, brother. And thank you for being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.